So you're raising a subject that I wanted to bring up. Greece is full of beautiful islands. One of them is Kastelloristo. I imagine you would not want people to vacation there, right? Because is there a danger you will go to war with Turkey over this tiny island?
We will not go to war with Turkey. And although we've witnessed a lot of tension over the past 3 years, Kastellori is only one of the beautiful, Greek islands. Speaking of vacationing, we've had a fantastic tourism season in 2022, and it looks like we will have a bumper year again in 23. And of course, tourism is very important for our economy. But look, we should be able to sit down with Turkey as reasonable adults and resolve our main difference, which is the delimitation of maritime zones in the Aegean and the Eastern Mediterranean. It's a complicated issue because of the geography of the Aegean, but we've been able to resolve similar problems with our neighbors. We did it with Italy, we did it with Egypt, and with Albania, we're contemplating taking the issue to the International Court and let the court decide on our behalf. As long as you agree on the playbook, and the playbook is you resolve your problems according to international law, and in particular the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Seas. You don't provoke unnecessarily provoke your neighbors. You keep channels of communication open. And I think it's also never helpful to sort of weaponize foreign policy for domestic reasons. It's usually not a good approach because you end up poisoning your public opinion. And I'm more concerned with, because there's a lot of, noise in Turkey about, Greece, building up its armed forces. And I ask, does anybody reasonably believe that the Greek islands are a threat to the Turkish mainland? Or is it more realistic to believe that the Turkish mainland is a threat to the Greek islands, especially keeping in mind the Cyprus story in 1974? We had an invasion, and a third of the island is still occupied. So I think that after the elections, it's interesting that they will take place around the same time in both countries. I don't know which government will emerge out of Turkey, but certainly I think there are ways of lowering the tension, working on issues of common interest, agreeing to disagree. But even if we agree to disagree, we can do so in a civilized manner. We don't need to threaten each other or engage in overflights or other very provocative activities that increase the risk of an accident.
Do you think President Erdogan wants to resolve these issues?
I've spoken with President Erdogan many times. Although we've had our very, very difficult moments, I don't think that I do not consider it impossible to find a solution with President Erdogan.
You said in a previous interview that first he has to give up his Ottoman fantasies.
Yeah, I mean that's important because at some point there are issues which are simply off the table. We cannot discuss the issue of sovereignty of Greek islands. We cannot accept, for example, the fact that Turkey signs a memorandum of understanding with Libya that denies Crete any right to maritime zones. These are completely unacceptable premises. So if we narrow the discussion to the real issues, yes, we can find a solution. But if we broaden the discussion to issues that I'm not willing to discuss, then we cannot have a discussion.
President Erdogan is currently holding up Sweden's membership in NATO.
And Finland, yeah.
As I understand it, the main issue is with Sweden. Greece has been a member of NATO from the beginning. Do you think his objections are valid?
No, and I think he's not helping the alliance at a time when we need to be rock solid. But I also need to point out that Turkey is not imposing any sanctions on Russia. It's the only NATO country that is not imposing sanctions on Russia, which is also an issue because there's significant sanctions leakage. So I understand that every country has a right to formulate its own foreign policy, but I do need to point out that when it comes to making sure that the Western alliance is strong, Turkey is not exactly consistent with what all the other NATO member states have done. And Finland and Sweden, apart from the fact that they have made a difficult decision to abandon decades of neutrality to join NATO, will also be valuable additions to the alliance.
Do you believe that, I mean, you think about this in terms of you come from a background in markets and such, it seems very unlikely that the sanctions against Russia are going to be lifted anytime soon. So we are in a world where Russia is simply isolated from the world economy, and the energy markets, global commerce will just have to adjust to that, right?
Exactly. This is what's happening. And I think this is, regardless of what will happen, and we all hope that the war will stop, because it's horrible what's happening.